Morning.
Good morning. How are we? I have
Did
coffee.
the clocks change?
I heard this ridiculous thing on the
I,
news
what was
this
it?
morning. It was the news announcer saying it's going to take 4 days for people to recover from the clocks going forward.
4 days. Wow, that's like people have poor constitutions. And
It's
I don't know. I don't. That sounds very dramatic. Per an hour change.
I know, it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, my girlfriend asked me this morning. She asked me that question this morning. I looked at the time and she's like, "What time is it?" It's like 9:30. Did the clocks change? Maybe, probably. I don't know. Who cares? You
Well,
need
we
to
did.
know that the phones change them automatically. I don't have a clock anywhere that I need to change. Everything's done for me. So
Me too.
it doesn't have to be part of my it doesn't have to be part of my concerns whatsoever. Like really doesn't.
It doesn't.
I
So
don't think I
true.
have a single clock. Yeah, no, I do. The only clocks that I have technically are my heaters. And I think the heater in the bathroom displays the time. And I think now it should be back at the right time because I didn't change it over the winter. Which I thought several times during the winter that it was strange because it should have been the winter time, given that's the only time I really use the heater. So I don't know if why is in British summertime or summertime rather, not British because I'm not in Britain, but
That there are so many funny things. What you just said. That
this
is
is the kind of stuff I say that I'm like, this is normal. Then my girlfriend laughs and I'm like, why are you laughing? I don't understand. But you're laughing too.
because
So
it's ridiculous.
I don't
It's
think it's
different.
sufficient to make a career out of it, but so I
Oh
don't
my
think
god.
I could reliably have a whole room laugh at these stories, but
Well, you probably could actually, but it's the way you
maybe
tell it.
I would
It
have
is.
to.
And you've actually done stand up, haven't you? Oh my god.
Well,
That's
I mean, I've done stand up, not really.
for
I've
two
done
minutes,
one
five
one
minutes.
workshop and a 1 minute trial to pop my cherry.
You did it for 1 minute. I thought you did it for 5 minutes.
No, 1 minute is already super long. It was practice.
But in front of a real crowd.
No, I mean a real crowd. No, not really. It was a crowd of people that were practicing in
Oh,
a bar. I mean, but people I didn't know,
I thought you actually
not
did
part of
a
the workshop.
slot, like
A slot at a open mic
yeah,
at 6 p.m. of
yeah,
people practicing their
yeah.
stand-up.
No, I thought you did an actual like open mic at some place.
No, I
Okay.
did an open mic at some place with, I
I see what you're
believe,
saying.
an
Yeah.
audience of mostly stand-up comedians practicing their craft.
Okay, fine.
I
Fine.
believe I didn't ask every one of them what they were doing there, but most of them, that's what they were doing there.
Um, let's go back to the clocks thing because I've just realised there are clocks I need to
I
change, like my
didn't write that
car.
we were going to talk about the clocks in this episode. Is this okay?
No, it's just
Just
I
for our
still
faithful
can't
viewers who like might think that we're going to talk about clock changing for an hour.
I just still can't get over your heaters. Oh my god.
There's just the
The
one heater in the bathroom, and my microwave, but it doesn't display the time because I just didn't set it.
yeah, no,
It
I changed the
displays zero
microwave,
zero.
the cooker, and the car. The car doesn't change automatically.
Ooh.
Mm. So we were going to talk about stories and Dungeons and Dragons and politics, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Or we are.
I wanted to talk about. Well, I mean, stories. I can still talk about my video game, so that's okay.
No, well, okay, start there. What's the video game? Triangle,
Just
whatever.
Triangle strategy.
What is it?
Triangle strategy is a
It sounds like
tactical.
a marketing new model, communication model that you've created.
No, that one existed for a long time. They just took it for it's. Well, okay. To arguably, it's not a very creative name for a game.
It's not.
And the box. Actually, I should go get it because it's actually quite funny.
So Willem's getting the box for Triangle Strategy. When he said that, I didn't think it was a computer game. I thought it was some book.
Oh no, it's not. Okay. It's okay, actually. Sorry,
Is it
I
on
thought it was
Switch?
less creative than that. Huh? I thought the box was just black because the icon in my on my console is just black. There's no visual. It's just black. It's really good. I
But
had
the name, the name doesn't match the picture at all, in my mind.
no, but it doesn't matter.
Not at all. What is it?
So it's a tactical story RPG. And I had never really played tactical RPGs. So they're a subgenre or genre that came out of Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy.
Mhm.
And I think actually the first, because I read something about it, the first tactical RPG may have been, I could be wrong on this, but I read something saying so, was Final Fantasy Tactics. So it's a story with characters, and
Mhm.
then you have battles where it's just kind of a board with squares, and you have all your characters have got different abilities, and you have to. It's a tactical battle where you have to be able to, well, basically win the conditions in a turn by turn, kind of like a
Oh,
board game a little bit. And each one of your characters have got certain turns, certain advantages, certain powers, and you have to think about tactically strategically, what's your strategy for the battle, and what are the tactics that you're going to employ to get the strategy. So it's very thinky stuff, and I spend a lot of
okay.
time on it. And what I had not really expected, I did read about it a little bit before I bought it because I just found it secondhand, and there were a lot of people raving about the game. So I thought, okay, cool, that seems like a good secondhand game to pick up.
Mhm.
And it's very, very, very story heavy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Even though they're quite, I mean, it's kind of like the graphics are sort of like a Zelda or Secret of Mana game from Super Nintendo,
Mhm.
but they call the style 2D HD because the characters are all very pixelized, like old school, even though the game was
Mhm.
made last year, but it was made for the Switch. So because the Switch doesn't have a huge amount of power,
No. Yeah.
they're going back to a lot of traditional games,
Yeah.
but the
Yep.
special effects are 3D. Or like if you've got a water or something like that, that's kind of like in um Unreal Engine 3D, but the rest of the characters and everything are just in 2D. So it doesn't take a lot of space, which is great. And there's an insane amount, like a huge amount of dialogues, and there's all voice acted. There's all voice acting for everything, almost everything.
Wow.
And I think it's called Triangle Strategy because you have these three kingdoms and that have an interplay between them, and you find yourselves in the middle of those. And the backstory is it's not very original, a little bit like Dungeons and Dragons in that way. It's not super original, it's a bit traditional,
Mhm.
like a fantasy medieval type background,
Yep. Yep.
but it's very intricate. Like you can notice some plot holes, but like really, really intricate. And there's a couple of really good and very interesting game mechanics. One is that you're given the story branches and you have to make decisions about where you go. And the decisions and choices you have to make are always messed up. They're really bad. They're really,
Yeah.
you're given the choice and you're like, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, but I guess that's the choice I have. And you have to go talk to all your advisors, and everybody votes. So you have to convince them to vote the way you want. And to
Oh
be
my
able to do
gosh.
that,
Wow.
and it's also called Triangle Strategy because there's three different directions, and each one of the kingdoms represents one of the orientations between morality, utility, and liberty or freedom. And every time your character has three replicas to things to say that reinforce your convictions to go in
Yeah.
one of the three directions.
Yep.
And sometimes it's very obvious which of the three lines of dialogue matches which thing, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's not obvious, and or depending on the situation you might want to go one direction or another, which then has a consequence on
Yep.
all the different advisors and people who work for you, because if you take too many decisions that are against the opinions or convictions of one of your advisors, they might leave at some point and say, well, I don't agree with the way that you're doing things anymore. And so all that, and you have scenes that are part of the regular, like the main plot, and then you have side scenes which you can go and look, and all the side scenes are about all the different. So you have these three kingdoms, And
Yeah.
within each kingdom, you have all these different like power struggles between different characters, and there's tons of characters involved. And you generally see scenes of dialogue between one character and within one kingdom who's plotting a thing, and you don't know what they're plotting, and then you have to make decisions, but you don't know what everybody's doing, of course. And what's for sure is that the rare times that there's not tons of decisions, but every time there is one that you have to go to, well, you don't have to. I go talk to everybody. I'm madly overthinking. I'm like, I'm not sure which path should I take, and I really enjoy it. And what's for sure is that the couple of times where there's a serious choice to be made, and the direction seemed obvious, and I was like, well, we should obviously do this.
Yeah.
Then the consequences are really messed up anyway.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, we should do this, and then something else happened. You're like, oh well, I didn't know that would happen. Shit, that sucks.
I was just looking at my
It's
phone
really
because
good.
you're reminding me of a conversation I had with two of my pupils at school. So I think they're both 18. One of them's, yeah, they are both 18. One of them is this, like, applied to Oxford or Cambridge, didn't get in, super maths, like super amazing into math stuff, does loads and loads of like serious hardcore maths things, but he's also a gamer. And they were talking about he was saying he likes to play some obscure niche Japanese game where you spend loads of time programming something and then you race a car around a track or something. And Japanese gamers play it in a completely different way to maybe European and American gamers. And American gamers discovered there's a particular way you can set up the mechanics of the game so that when you run your car or whatever, it behaves in a different way to something else. Like, I was like, what kind of niche weirdness is this?
It sounds like you're I mean, it sounds super interesting, but
I can't remember the name of the game,
names or something.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember the name of it. And then
so it sounds like a racing game, but where you're planning the physics of the game.
Yeah. It's he said you're basically looking at a screen of like ones and zeros for ages before you get to run it. I was like, okay, that just doesn't sound that cool to me. But honestly, I don't know what the game is. I'll find out, and we can talk about that next week. So
Sure.
I'm going to remember
that. Then write it down.
Yeah, I'm writing it down.
Because apparently he supposedly said what we was going to talk about this week.
I did, of course. But I don't remember. And then the other thing, the other guy was talking to, because I was talking about Dead Cells and whatever, and he goes, yeah, I completely, because his younger brother had Dead Cells. He then drops this bomb in the conversation.
This is still one of your pupils.
Yeah, this is another pupil. Yeah, last year
of high school. So he's 16.
He's 18.
18.
Before he's going to university.
Okay.
The bomb he drops is, yeah, I completed Dead Cells on my third run. Yeah. I went through it all. On my first run, my brother was really annoyed that I got to the third boss. I was like, what? How? And then he said, yeah, I was playing some really difficult samurai game before. I think that's what it was. I'm like, okay, cool. And this is the thing I really want to ask, although I can't remember the name of the game, because I'm sure I reckon you've heard of it. Both of them said,
I'm not sure.
Well, we'll see. We'll get to it. There's a really beautiful game that's actually really good to play, that's been designed by a bunch of animators. Mm-hmm. And it's a kind of I think it's a black and white thing, something world. And something I did look at. Yeah, I can't. It's terrible of me. I can't remember the name. I was trying to look it up if I had it on my phone, but it was, and I was thinking about getting it. It was it's a difficult game. White.
It's difficult.
So unhelpful.
Something world.
I know. So
you're typically the middle-aged and/or person. The few months I worked at a bookstore, where people are like, "I'm looking for a book." Yes, I think the cover's red. Okay. Do you have
super
any more
unhelpful.
About the book you're looking for?
I know. It was
but my friend said it was really good. Okay, that narrows it down. Thank you very much. Let's see what we can do.
The thing that I think narrowed it down is that it wasn't designed by game designers. It was designed by a bunch of animators. And
I mean, I'm thinking of So there's a game that's a platform game that's meant to be quite difficult
Yeah,
called
and they said it was
Cuphead,
difficult.
and it's not what black
No,
and
not
white. It's
Cuphead.
designed.
I know
Okay, not
Cuphead.
Cuphead. There's a black and white game supposed to come out now, but called Blanc, I think. That's a black and white a drawing, but it doesn't match what you're saying. It's not called
No, it
World.
doesn't. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, that's so annoying. It's the kind of thing that's really going to annoy me, but I probably annoy you too.
No, because I'm not. I think we should just move on. Because
Yeah, we will.
Sorry.
Rain World.
Rain World. I have never
Yeah.
heard of this.
You never heard of it? Okay. But there was that game too.
So I should look up Rain World.
Yeah, that I did, and it's purely from a conversation talking about Dead Cells. But when these two guys were talking, and one of them said he completed Dead Cells in his third run, I was like, how many hours are you playing computer games instead of doing my work?
Yes. Well, clearly he's played a lot of video games and he's particularly good at it, or some balance of those two things.
I think so. But what was interesting to me about their conversation was
Much better than I am, that's for sure.
They were also talking about a real-time strategy game, not StarCraft, something that they really liked. It was a space one. And we were talking about Elite. They were both getting into the idea of a story and the story of the game as much as the playability and the mechanics and all of that. And I do think if a game doesn't have a good story, then what's the point of playing it?
There's a lot of people that don't really care about the story. They just like go through the motions. Dead Cells is not real. I mean, you could argue it's not really about the story. However, I think the narrative of the story is there through the atmosphere and the cues. If you pay attention to it,
yeah,
because it's designed extremely well.
Yeah,
there's bits and pieces of dialogue just to put you in the mood, but it's about a mood rather than it is about the story. Arguable.
One of the
because
things
otherwise the story is you're just a guy and you're trying to escape the prison and you die and start over again. That's the story.
Well, that is a story. But the other game that I keep going back to that Dead Cells reminded me of is Prince of Persia, and that story was so good. I thought it was so good, and I just want to play that game again.
What was the story again? It was a prince of Persia trying to save a princess, wasn't it?
Well, no. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. There's like,
was it?
Yeah, the Grand Vizier has overtaken the kingdom, and the prince has been thrown in prison without a sword, and the princess is going to marry at a certain amount of time he's got, and he starts in the dungeon. He has to make his way out.
I think it's quite a basic story. Come on.
I know.
I think it's also because
really
you
basic.
played it a long time ago and you hadn't read a lot of stories. And if it's done well, it works. Just like this game and playing Triangle Strategy. It's not massively original, but it's really riveting because there's a lot of characters and I got into it.
Well, this...
And there's also a lot of, even though you disregard a little bit of, you gloss over some of the things that seem to be very important, but you're like, that feels like a little bit of a plot hole. I don't really understand why salt is such an important, but okay, let's see. Everybody's saying it's an important, vital resource. So, okay, sure.
But this goes to this book that I'm reading that I think you said sounds riveting, but that was a bit of sarcasm on your part. Effective data storytelling.
It was a little bit, but it sounded interesting. Yeah.
Now,
well, you're saying it interesting, so I usually believe you.
The book
just to me, you said it's called effective data storytelling.
Effective data storytelling.
Oh, do you know? Funny enough, because I'm going to make a jab about it, just like you making a jab about my game. What I was sarcastic about was that the title seems like a manual that doesn't come across as effective storytelling, even though it says so.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
That's why I thought about Everybody Lies is their storytelling in the title and in the whole book, whereas this one doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't seem like it could be.
But it could. I'll let you talk about it.
But Everybody Lies is I'm going to read that next for sure because I know I'd love that. Mm-hmm. But as much as effective data storytelling is about data and all that kind of stuff, it's also I'm learning a lot about the importance of stories that I didn't know,
For
and
example,
or stuff that I kind of knew but I hadn't stumbled across for a while. For example, how hardwired we are to learn through stories.
yeah.
And
Well, I mean, we'd read some of the theory on that, or some of the proponents of those kinds of ideas. For example, Yuval Noah Harari, and he talks about fiction and our hardwired for stories. And I'm sure we talked about other authors that theorize and talk about this stuff before. No,
we have.
what are the
and
references in this book? What does he talk about, and who does he refer to put that?
I can't remember exactly. Oh, he talks about System 1, System 2 a bit from
Okay, so we got Daniel
Thinking
Kahneman
Fast
and
and Slow.
Amos Tversky.
He talks about a couple of authors who I'd never heard of who do talk about how if you present something if you present a series of facts, nobody cares. If you present it as part of a narrative, then people get it, people remember it,
Yeah,
and people actually understand things a lot more.
well, that's certainly also what I do all the time, and I try to show my students.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing with my clients, well, the work I'm doing, and I've been procrastinating for a lot of this week, to be honest. I'm working on projects for clients to help them structure their offer and pitching decks. And a lot of their problem is exactly that. And that's what I also try to show students, and the way that I present my ideas and the work essentially that I do and what I get paid for really is exactly that, what I mean by that is how to talk about and structure your thinking in a series of logical steps to get somebody to be on board with the idea that you want to sell them, so that it's persuasive. And persuasive goes through having a lot of thinking, but distilling it down to very simple points, and making it look to everybody like, oh wow, that was so obvious, why hadn't we thought about it before? And you bring them through with narrative steps of like very simple 1, 2, 3 ABC type steps. That's also why a lot of things are presented in 3s or in 5, but 3s usually work, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, sorry, I might have interrupted you.
No, it's fine, because everything you're saying relates to what I've been thinking.
And I have to use a lot of data in what I'm doing work-wise as well. I look at a lot of data, and I have to pick the 1 to 3 things that explain why we should go in the direction we should go in. This is why we should do this, Mr. Client, because ABC. And these are the 3 bits and pieces of information I've found, or data pieces, or etc.
You're reminding me of some of what I've read. So in the book, and I can do this, sometimes I can be so convinced I've got a bunch of facts that are really good that I just communicate the facts without thinking about how does that fit into anything else. And if you just throw facts at people, it makes no difference. In fact, it can actually, the boomerang effect is where you present a bunch of facts, but it actually entrenches people in their previous opinion, even though you're presenting facts that actually go against their opinion, because you haven't appealed to the emotional side. He also talks about we make decisions more with our emotions than we realize, which is why the whole System 1, System 2 comes in. And then
we make decisions with both. Both emotional and rational, System 1, System 2. So a good presentation, a persuasive argument, 1, you have to present to somebody who's open to it and who's listening, otherwise there's no point. 2, you have to know what their opinions are, so that you go from there and you fit in, you fit what you're ideally, you fit in what they are, and you're talking about what you're talking about in a framework and in a way of speaking that matters to them and their concerns. Now it depends what it is we're doing, but I'm bringing the cover towards a little bit of what I'm doing in, well, persuasive argument, presenting something. It could be something else entirely, whatever it is, like while teaching. But teaching is a bit similar. You're presenting something, and you would like, well, it's not similar because you want to transmit a piece of knowledge or a way of doing things. You have a lot more authority. So you don't use the same flow of arguments for teaching than you do for convincing a client that this is the right thing to do.
But what I've noticed that I do a lot of is tell stories.
Yeah,
the
ideally, you
way
tell a lot of stories for sure.
the way my teaching has shifted over the course of this academic year has been I have a lot more material that I've put together, and it's not on PowerPoint, but I use that to tell stories about and illustrate. And I think we talked about last time about how I end up telling, or a couple of weeks ago, or whenever we spoke, of how I
I'm
end up
sure we
telling
talked about stories a bunch of times.
but in my lessons, I'll pick examples that are like that ice cream shop. Yeah, we did talk about this. The ice cream shop, or the cinema, or the high street, or some Instagram ad that I've seen and I've ended up buying the product. I end up using those examples and telling stories about those examples to illustrate the theoretical point that they need to know.
Yes.
So but it works because they remember it. So in this book, he talks about two other things that I think you might find interesting. One is a Star Trek metaphor. Captain Kirk will go to the superlogical Mr. Spock, Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock, and he'll also go to the over emotional Bones, and then he'll make a decision from both of them. Which I thought was quite a nice way of remembering the way we make decisions. We use both, just like you said. And the other example he gives is the historical example of the Hungarian doctor who loads of women were dying in childbirth in the equivalent of a maternity ward. I don't know, it was a couple of 100 years ago or something. It was a long time ago. But the doctors weren't washing their hands in between, dealing with
I'm sure
dead.
The example in another best-selling nonfiction book somewhere.
Yeah, it talks about that a lot. But he did tons of research and he tracked all his stuff, and he presented his data as a bunch of tables. And it was like he tried to overwhelm everybody with facts. Look at the facts. If you just do this, and he was vilified by the medical profession. Everyone thought he was talking rubbish. No, it's something else that's causing the people to die and whatever. And he actually ended up dying from sepsis because he got a cut that wasn't treated properly or something ridiculous like that. But he couldn't. He had all the information. He had all the data. He had the argument, but he didn't put it across in a way that made a difference because he couldn't. He didn't know how, and it didn't work. Whereas I think it was Joseph Lister had a similar thing about antiseptics, and this is because the Hungarian doctor, it was before Pasteur, before germ theory, before antiseptics. When Lister came out with wash your hands, antiseptics, after Pasteur and germ theory and all that kind of stuff, the way he presented it was different, and it actually meant that people took it on board. And then of course I knew this kind of idea of using stories and making it personal when you see the charity ads where they personalize the charity, and it's like this individual, this person with whatever name, when you donate, you make a difference to that person or this animal or whatever. All those charity ads use that to persuade people to donate to them. They put it as part of a narrative and the story, because we love stories. But I notice my tendency can be to just throw loads of facts at people rather than actually think about, well, how does this fit in with what we're trying to do?
But do you throw lots of facts for people to convince them of things, or just because you are compelled by facts and like talking about them?
Sometimes it's to convince. Sometimes it's because I'm irritated and I want the other person to just believe me because I'm right.
There's another thing, which is, it depends what it is we're talking about, but there are a lot of let's say the category of areas that are linked to profound convictions, that are linked to the sense of who we are, such as religious, political, or values or beliefs about the world that could be political or something else, are intrinsically, for most people, linked to the emotional centers of like, this is who I am. And we're not particularly receptive to any information that goes against the grain of the beliefs and convictions that we have in that sense, unless you're particularly enlightened like us and we
because we're not human, we're actually enlightened beings from
another
dimension.
Okay, well, we're just enlightened humans. So there, you could tell the story whatever story you want, but if you're trying to tack on to convince somebody of the opposite or something different to what ties into their like core beliefs that they tie into who they are, that's a whole other story and not particularly easy.
No,
So
you're
you have
spot
to
on.
kind of
This,
detach.
and he talks
So
about that
it's
in the book
yeah.
too. Exactly the
Okay.
same thing. Because if I presented something that threatens the way someone thinks, what we'll do is we'll ignore it.
Yeah.
And
Or
find,
reinterpret it within your worldview.
yes, that's what I was about to say. So it fits my particular opinion, view, story,
Yeah,
my own
exactly. So
story, my own
the
personal
dinosaur
story.
bones that were placed there 5,000 years ago by God. And he placed them with the carbon-14 footprint that makes it look like they were 65 million years old. Why? I don't know. The voice of God is...
It wasn't actually God. It was an alien that was sent here to trigger life through a new reaction, like in
But
Prometheus.
was that 5,000 years ago or 65 million years ago?
Who knows when it was?
That's plausible. It's actually plausible.
What then? Yeah. Well, isn't that's in Prometheus?
But that's plausible because that's because it fits my worldview a little bit more than the God thing.
Well, I do. Do you know that Christmas song by Chris de Burgh, "A Spaceman Came Traveling"?
Probably. It rings a bell.
It's the Christmas story, but basically a spaceman lands and on the planet to actually tell everyone there's a different way you could live. Everybody, let's be cool with each other. It's a really nice song, and I do like that idea that aliens just pop in. Jimi Hendrix popped in to show us what to do with the guitar, and then changed everything.
So did the without spoilers, did the latest John Wick chapter 4 use effective data in its storytelling, or did it use data effectively? I think last week I talked about the guy I met at the wine bar that worked on the production while they were in Paris. Remember that?
No. Yes, you did, because there is a ton of it in Paris. You did. Yeah.
And he just was talking about the fact that everything was hilariously late, and there was one of the messiest productions he's worked on, and craziest in terms of the amount of just money and strange decisions that they made to get them stuck in the middle of the night.
When you watch the film, you will understand why.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to go see it later.
There was no the data. Okay, fine, but the story.
I mean, I'm joking about the story.
I know.
I've seen 3 of the John Wicks that get crazier and crazier, and still the same story. It's just, I was amazed at the end of the 3rd one because I thought they would wrap it up. I'm like, oh my God, they're going for another one.
Well,
with still the same story. He's angry and killing everybody.
But I'm not. No spoilers. No spoilers. But this honestly, the story gets bigger. There was a point where I was like, okay, what? This is back to the universal good, evil kind of big themes again, of course. It felt like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but and I don't think it's a spoiler. I'm trying really hard not to say anything about the film.
Yeah.
It felt like the epicness of Dune to me. Okay. Now
I mean, it's the fact that it's epic and it's in its own genre. I'm not surprised, because the 3rd one was the second. They were all like crazier and crazier, and this one's nearly 3 hours long, which is insane.
And it doesn't feel, to me, it didn't feel like, both of us, Davina and I, it didn't feel like 3 hours. It seriously didn't, and it was.
Should I? I usually go see these kinds of movies
an intense
a lot
watch
on my own, but should I have somebody to watch it with, or does it matter? Doesn't matter. We'll see. I'll see if I find somebody to go with.
I don't think it matters. We saw it in IMAX, and it was definitely worth seeing in IMAX. Yeah,
I'll go see it on a big screen next to the house, but probably not IMAX. But...
oh God, it was really good. It was really good, and I thought it was paced well, but honestly, it didn't feel like 3 hours. And there were genuine moments.
What happened at the end of the second one?
End of the second or third?
The third. Sorry, the third. I saw it at the cinema as well, and I'm like, Wait a
There was the
minute.
Halle
So
Berry
he was
one.
fighting. Halle Berry had dogs in the desert.
The finger.
Yes.
He chops his finger off
What? Why does he do that again?
because he wants to get out of being a killer. He wants a way out of his life as a killer. And there's lots of stuff about the
High table.
the high table and all
But
that
then
kind of stuff.
at the end, he gets saved by the. Sorry, we're spoiling the third one. Just in case
We are
anybody's
spoiling
not
the third
watched
one.
that.
The
But
Barry
you should-
King.
Huh?
The Barry King he gets saved by.
Yeah, the guy who's like with all the homeless people,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Played by
Morpheus.
yes,
Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah,
You remember he gets shot off the roof by Winston
that's
in
right.
McShane.
That's right. Oh, that's the one where there's the big fight in the glass box with Ian McShane at the end.
Yeah.
That was not.
Well, no, it's on the top of the building in number 3.
But there's all this glass that gets.
Yeah,
broken.
there is. Yeah, there
that's
is.
the one.
Yeah, it is. So I didn't honestly, like yourself, I didn't think they could. Where do you go from there? It's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. Where could the story possibly go that could be satisfying? It's stupid. It's ridiculous. And they do it. And
Presumably they have to invent more things about the underground, the high table, and the principles. You're like, all right, maybe.
You'd think that, but it works. It works. And
they make it work. They make it work. It's good.
They make it work. The action scenes are absolutely superb. Like, again, you think after I watched the first one, I was like, this is done so well. It's done so well, and I thought it was pitched perfectly. He's pissed off, and he has every reason to be pissed off, and it's set so well. He just goes for it the whole film. And they set this world with little gold coins and assassins and like the hotel. And it's like, oh, there's this whole other thing. But it's hinted at really well.
Yes.
And the second one, they take it even further. And the guns and the way he uses the guns. And like, okay.
Yeah, that was
great.
fantastic.
Then
it's funny because the guy who worked on the production was saying, well, really, because we were with somebody else who hadn't seen the movies. And he was like, well, the first one's really the best. I'm like, well, yes, and because they do get crazier, there's a lot more money poured into the production of every single one of them, so the action gets insane. And he's like, yeah, that's true, but it's still a better movie. And I'm like, well,
but
yes,
the first one,
action scenes are so crazy, and
they're so crazy. The first one was great. I thought the second one worked. The third one was really good, but not as good as the first one.
I agree with
this
that
one.
I thought this one really good.
Yeah,
okay. I'm definitely going to go see it today. It's funny because I hesitated to go see it on Friday, but got stuck playing my video games.
It's ridiculous, but it works. It absolutely works. And the other thing I really liked about the other films is the setting and the feel of it and the location.
You heard that they're making a spin-off?
Are they? No, I haven't heard of what.
Getting silly.
Which character?
Well, I think it's a new character, but what they're using is I think it's in the third one where there's the ballerina school.
Oh, I did hear about this. Yeah.
So a killer coming out of the ballerina school of whatever her name is. Yeah.
I did hear about that. I think that there are better characters they could have explored.
I don't know if there's a character that's already there
it's
or
not.
If it's a new
it's
one. I
people,
think it's a new one.
It's a new one, but
they're just using some bit of the little universe they created.
Yeah. And it is that thing about creating a universe. They've done that, and it's immersive, and it's done very well. And the tonally, it works.
Yeah.
Across the world, and this is going to sound so Eurocentric and stuff, but European cities are way cooler. They've got so much more history and so much more little underground nonsense that I felt that in Paris when we went to Paris. Like, there's another massive palace in the middle of the city.
Yeah, and I felt that going to Venice recently and being told
there's another
by the guy
huge
that
palace.
Mission Impossible shot there a couple of years ago for the new one coming out.
There's another
And you'd
one.
understand why.
There's another Mission Impossible.
You didn't saw the trailer for Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's a two-parter.
Oh God, no, I didn't. Because
they seem like they're taking several pages, and they had been, or I don't know who took pages from whom in the first place, but from Fast and Furious, which there's another one coming out of that
God,
too.
yeah, there is. I can't be bothered with that anymore. I lost its way.
Do you think it had a way in the first place? I stopped watching them, although I never really I think I watched one or two. I'm not even sure.
The first one's great. The first one's really good. The second one is all right, and then I was like, forget it.
No, I think they're at number 10.
Yeah, it is number 10. It is. It's silly. But I think the story, the whole John Wick thing, it does work. It definitely, the universe creating, the locations, I'm used to London, and when we went to Paris, it felt completely different, and it felt bigger.
Where did you come to Paris?
Not bigger. A few years ago, pre-COVID. Before we were talking.
Funny enough, I was just thinking yesterday and this morning about the fact that I might move from my apartment, which is super well located in the center of Paris, and a lot of my friends haven't come. Now there's COVID, but also I think also there's just life and budgets and etc. But you know that you're invited all the time. You always.
I do, and even more so now. But with walking around London, you can feel it's super modern and old, proper old.
I mean, I agree with you on European cities. Anyway, I mean, I moved back to Europe. It's funny because when you said that, I thought about it's not a very nice comparison, but it's the first thing that came to mind. Michael Bay movies, and I thought about I can't remember if it was the first Transformers or one of the Transformer movies where there's a big fight in maybe Chicago. And they destroy a lot of buildings, and it's Michael Bay, so you just don't your eyes are blurry and like crying, or you're tearing from too much going on the screen at one time. But yeah, I generally agree with you on European cities. They have a lot more interesting stuff going on. But then,
and given
I'm biased, I like Europe, so then again, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in big Asian cities too, and they use them for a lot of cinema. So I don't know.
Well, it's in John Wick as well.
Which one?
It's in Japan.
I don't think it's a big spoiler to say which city they're in.
It's probably Tokyo, but I don't know if it is.
Fine,
it's in Japan. But you couldn't take all these big themes that got in John Wick 2 and 3 and not have it in Europe. It wouldn't have worked in America. Because the high table and all that pretentiousness, but it works. It worked for me. So story.
It did have
really
the Godfather in New York. I mean, that's not, but it's old school. It comes from Italy.
Yeah, but it went back to Sicily.
They do go back to Sicily. All right, that's John Wick. Good. Should we?
No, that's stories. Stories now. Stories, narratives. Oh, speaking of stories.
So the reviews for the new Dungeons and Dragons movies are coming out, and apparently it's a good movie. Everybody was worried that it's a bad movie, but it seems like it's going to be fun. Their reviews reviews are saying it's actually really good. So I'm curious about that. And so last year we played a investigation role-playing game, and we were wondering about possibly playing another type of game of perhaps Dungeons and Dragons this year.
Now, I've never played it, and do you need multiple players?
No, I mean, well, it's great to play in a group, but it's more the original idea. But we could also organize something just for you because it's easier to schedule, just because we have our schedule going on.
Yeah, us doing it if it works.
Yeah, why not? We're making it up. It's just story. Yes, I can absolutely organize something for one player and something short. Even just like creating your character could be easily one call in and of itself. We can even start now, actually. But yeah, otherwise what we played last time is very similar, and what we talked about. There's probably as many ways to play Dungeons and Dragons as there are groups of players. There's a lot of people that play in a quite traditional style. What I mean by traditional is you are a group of people that were created individually by people at the table, and a high propensity of teenagers or young adults, students, with dreams and tropes of your ideal fantasy character self. Now we always have some of that because it's a role-playing game. So there's like whatever you do, you always have some of that, even if you're trying to explore something a little bit different. We tend to have types of characters that we're drawn to, and we tend to play those same kinds of things. But where I'm going with that particular idea is more often than not, in a lot of traditional groups, you have a group of players because it's a team kind of play, but with no reason whatsoever to be together, and with extreme personalities that should not be sitting at the same tavern table like at all, because it doesn't make any kind of sense. You have like some kind of guy who's decided to have to negotiate to be able to have an evil necromancer, and you're like, well, no, you shouldn't have an adventure necromancer, but okay, maybe why not? Fine, we'll do it. And then there's another person. It's just like you can imagine the worst personality traits combined in one person, and or with absolutely no reason to be sitting next to this. So you have these. It happens quite often that you have these really strange mismatched groups that don't operate as a group, that operate as strong personalities that are trying to each do whatever they want. Now, that's also part of the reason why increasingly a lot of players and a lot of groups, and this is something I talk about, and I don't know if it's actually recommended in the books officially, but I recommend to have a session with the players at first to say, okay, well, we're playing as a group. So while of course I want you to create whatever character you personally want to play, remember that you're playing as a group. So as a group, what is it that you want to play together? So that you put some sense into, and you create a context inside of which the group exists and has some cohesion, and or you give it to them. And that can be created also. This usually what's called a session 0, to talk about the expectations, what kind of stuff do you want to play, what kind of genre, what are you hoping to have or not have? Are there any things that are big no-nos for anybody that you don't want, in terms of like, what do you want as part of the story that you're going to live? To bring it back to the idea of a story.
Well, that's a great phrase you just used, the story you're going to live.
Yeah,
I love that.
Because you're creating the story together in a role-playing game. You're interpreting your character, but and then that story is more or less on rails depending on the wants and the person who is the narrator or the game master, the dungeon master, depending on the kinds of stuff they feel comfortable with in terms of experience. They might have a scenario, so there's the rails, and you're kind of following the lines of the scenario. You're interpreting your character, and that could be the more what I would call traditional, as in your group of characters and your barbarian, magician, sorcerer, rogue, whatever you've created as a character, is sitting with 3 or 4 other people at the tavern, having a drink, and some shifty character comes up and says, well, I am looking for really brave adventurers to go take care of this thing that I need done. I misplaced a bunch of treasure, and it happens to be down in a cave that is guarded by trolls. So could you go and take care of that for me? And then you find yourself in the middle of a dungeon. And in the dungeon, I will describe, like, there's stairs. The stairs go down in the subterranean areas of the ruins of this particular mine shaft that was abandoned by the dwarves 100 years ago, is meant to be maudit. How do you say that? It's meant to be haunted, let's say.
Okay.
And then you walk down, and I'll describe all the places, and I'll say there's a room in front of you. What do you do? And you explore that dungeon, go and kill monsters, discover it, find the treasure, bring it back. So nothing wrong with that. That can be a lot of fun, and that's actually what I'm doing with a group of players on a campaign basis, with a set of rules called Old School Essentials that are meant to mimic the rules from one of the original 2 boxes of Dungeons and Dragons.
Is this the group that you said you play every 2 weeks, but you end up playing every month?
Yeah, so we're playing every week, and we're still playing every month. That's not me. I'm being facetious. I missed 2 sessions because I was on holidays. They played.
Okay.
I didn't play. But then there were strikes on Thursday, so we didn't play on Thursday. We're playing next Thursday. But that's the one. So there was one that was every 2 weeks and ended up playing once a month or never. And this one's, we committed to once a week to be able to play just about once a month. Or me, anyway.
And you did mention, this is a question for me. You did say there were some YouTube channels with some really good playthroughs. There was a guy who's actually playing it. Do you say that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that's super popular actual play, it's called.
Yeah.
So you watch people playing.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Or shows.
Is there anybody
you'd like to
recommend?
watch that? Yeah, I don't watch any of it. So you can check out Critical Role, which is the biggest one. Okay. There's a bunch of others. I don't really know what's good or not good at. I find it quite quickly boring, to be honest.
Well, you would, but I wouldn't.
Why wouldn't you? How do you know if you haven't watched any?
Well, because I'm not as experienced as you are. That's my benchmark. I might find it boring. I'll tell you next week.
The thing, I mean, I kind of like the idea, but it's you're watching people play a game, and it's usually 3-4 hours. And after a while, I'm like, well, I would rather play myself or watch something that's been edited so that you're actually watching a movie or a TV show.
Mm.
All right. And then I guess, so I was talking about that on Rails, or you have something sometimes completely a lot more sandbox. So I, as the dungeon master, will have a set of an area, characters, areas like loosely defined, and then you go and do whatever you want. More often than not, it's a mix of both.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, there's a lot of, I might have talked about this before. There's a lot of talk and theory about how much agency should you have as a player, because you're interpreting a character, so that character should have freedom to do whatever they want. But there's also a lot of players that are just like, well, give me the story. I'll just throw the dice when you tell me to, and I'll react to the monsters. But I don't really want to think about what my character wants to do, because I don't even know what I want to do myself. So that's too much responsibility. I'd like to just go along with the flow. Now, people don't actually say that, just like talking earlier, like trying to figure out what people's expectations are. Sometimes they don't know that, but more often than not, for the vast majority of people playing, they just want to sit back and say, well, you do the work, give it to me and tell me what's happening, and I'll react and throw the dice, or rather than have to think about,
that's interesting.
What is it that I actually want? Because it takes effort. And I'm making the parallel right now that it takes effort for anybody. And most of the time we don't have time. This is going back from story into actually, being a human being. And me listening to a lot of Alan Watts and thinking about that kind of stuff. And I've been talking about that with my girlfriend quite a bit as well. As in, you circle back to having the privilege or taking the time, but also coming with the responsibility of saying, okay, if you're not happy with anything that's going on in your life, what is it you actually want? Now, you need to be able to have the space and mental space and time to be able to look at that. But one quickly realizes that comes with a lot of responsibility, and more often than not, you don't know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to say, I don't like this, I don't want this, I don't like my boss, I don't like my job, I dread the Monday morning. But then, okay, well, even if you're just only doing this for the sake of the exercise, what is it that you would want?
It's so true. It's exactly a conversation I'm having with one of my form. There's one pupil will be incessantly negative about everything. And I ask him, well, what are you into? What do you want to do? What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's the Alan Watts conversation. What do you desire?
Yeah.
He talks about exactly that with students. You go through the work. What is it you actually want? I'm
Because
so
it is
sorry,
very
I interrupted.
no, it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and moan about stuff rather than actually take responsibility for what you're creating. I
But
love how that
and
I
it
love
takes to,
I love how that links to role-playing games. You
yes,
can, and the two extremes. What I found interesting about what you just said is that with everything we're talking about, stories and creating stories and role-playing games as an opportunity to explore and create a character.
yeah.
But some people will actually just go with the flow and do whatever really.
Yeah, I mean,
find that
there's a lot of
surprising.
times I can't be bothered to think about all the ins and outs of my character, and there's a lot of games that are now designed in such a way that you don't have to figure out much about your character. And there are times where I really wanted to take a lot of initiative and think about what I want, but there's also times where I'm like, I can't be bothered to think about all that stuff. Just tell me what's happening, Mr. Game Master, and I'll react to what you're saying.
Really interesting because
And
it also
most people function like that from the get-go.
well, it's also reminded me of Bird by Bird, where you're exploring character, and then when you get into the character, it kind of you discover that it writes itself, or they write themselves.
Yeah, there's times where
but you've got to be willing to put stuff into it.
Yes, I might start a game, and I have a friend who enjoys those kinds of games more and more that are easy to get started. That you don't have a lot of effort to put into the character at first. Just put a couple of keywords and a couple of key things. You decide a trait, a couple of classes, and you decide a quirk of him, perhaps, and that gives you a vague idea. And then you start playing it, and then you start inhabiting the character a little bit, like you said. Perhaps you might. I think the vast majority of people playing role-playing games take it like a TV show plus. So
Okay.
So you have the story given to you, but you from time to time you can act. So like an interactive Netflix, where from time to time it's mostly given to you, but from time to time you make a choice and you just like go A or B. I'm exaggerating my traits a little bit.
You because I found it hard at first, and I was kind of nervous when we were doing Cthulhu Confidential.
Oh yeah, no, it makes you nervous.
Like,
and this
wow,
is not.
But it was.
This is a character that was given to you as well, so you had to just go into it.
So it was like, oh, okay, what would they be like? I found that difficult.
It's
so
not easy.
The idea of creating characters from scratch, okay, that I thought, and that's quite appealing. But the other idea I quite like is what you just said, where you start from a few basic things, and then as you go, you start to explore and discover more of the character.
Yeah. And they're step by step. So, for example, I'll just read some stuff from the Dungeons and Dragons, which is one of the ways we're doing it. And I guess we might do that. And I have a couple of friends who asked me if I wanted to do Dungeons and Dragons. So I was thinking of getting back into it because I haven't read these mostly. Step-by-step characters. Chapter 1. Your first step in playing an adventure in the Dungeons and Dragons game is to imagine and create a character of your own. Your character is a combination of game statistics, role-playing hooks, and your imagination. You choose a race. I think they've been talking about changing the word now, and because of modern standards of talking about what a race is, etc. Anyway, so in this particular case, that means choosing a human or a halfling. A halfling was their way to get around the copywriting of hobbits. So they're hobbits, except they're called halflings.
Yep.
And you have the choice between a dwarf, an elf, a halfling, a human, a dragonborn, a gnome, a half-elf, a half-orc, or a tiefling.
Gosh.
I don't know what that is.
What's the last one?
A tiefling. I don't know what a tiefling is.
Wow.
What's a tiefling?
A dragonborn. What the hell's a dragonborn?
That's what most teenage boys create. I don't know. I think you're a tiefling. I think it's like a dark elf. Oh, you're a half demon of some kind.
Ooh. So I'm simultaneously thinking of Lord of the Rings, where they all sit and then they meet Aragorn for the first time.
Yes,
and I'm also thinking of what's his face? Harry, the wizard.
Harry Potter.
No.
Oh, Harry Dresden.
Yeah, that's it. Harry Dresden.
Dragonborns are like half dragon, half like humanoid people.
Ooh. No.
And then You also invent the person, and then you choose a class. So classes are like you have barbarian, bard, cleric, druid, fighter, monk, paladin, ranger, rogue, sorcerer, warlock,
Oh my
and wizard.
gosh. What's a paladin?
A paladin. A paladin is a type of fighter that fights for a belief and a conviction. So it's sort of a warrior priest, if you will.
A Jedi.
I guess you could call it
No,
Jedi a paladin.
I'm teasing. I didn't know that paladin. Okay, it's the only one.
They might be closer to a monk,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you how it's described
Warrior
here.
priest sounds cool. I'm already getting ideas for this.
All right, so how do they describe? Paladin, clad in plate armor that gleams in the sunlight despite the dust and grime of long travel. A human lays down her sword and shield and places her hands on a mortally wounded man. Divine radiance shines from her hands, the man's wounds knit closed and his eyes wide open with amazement. And then there's a few other descriptions like that. The righteous. A paladin swears to uphold justice and righteousness, to stand with the good things of the world against the encroaching darkness, and to hunt the forces of evil wherever they lurk. Different paladins focus on various aspects of the cause of righteousness, but they are bound by the oaths that grant them power to do their sacred work. Yeah, I don't like paladins. It's way too goody two shoes. Anyhow, you also invent the personality, appearance, and backstory of a character. And then once completed, your character serves as your representative in the game, your avatar in the Dungeons and Dragons world. There you go.
It does sound really cool.
You think about the kind of adventurer you want to play. You might want to be a courageous fighter, a skulking rogue, a fervent cleric, or a flamboyant wizard. I play a priest in my Dungeons and Dragons games. A priest.
A priest. All right. Okay.
A priest of the goddess, what do I call it? Amnesia, the goddess of the right to be forgotten.
Did you create that?
How did I call it?
Is that your idea?
Yeah, it's my idea. No, sorry. So it's in French. So it's the the right to forgetfulness or the right to be forgotten. I don't know how to translate it.
I think the right to be forgotten sounds better.
But it's not to be forgotten. But yeah, it probably sounds better. But it's but really in French it translates literally as the right to forgetfulness. Des du droit à l'oubli. So it's not just about being forgotten. It's about
eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Amnesia. Did you create that word? Amnesia.
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 Yeah, for
amnesia.
Well, no, although amnesia sounds pretty good too.
I thought you meant amnesia, as in like a combination of omnipotent and amnesia. Either way,
that's actually pretty good too. Yeah, I might.
Well, that's what I thought. That's what you said. I thought that's what you meant. Okay, that. Yeah, I'm really surprised I didn't actually play Dungeons and Dragons when I was.
Yeah, it's not the first time you tell me that.
I know.
You're trying to be cool. Perhaps.
No, I think what it was genuinely is guitar. I got obsessed with guitar.
Oh, that probably is. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I think it could. I guess it could have gone either way. It could have gone like Dungeons and Dragons or guitar. Guitar is just too
right. I also went to see a really good comedy show this week. I forgot on Tuesday with a friend. Two comedians that were on TV for a long time. And I don't know if they're still on TV. I don't think they're still on TV. Anyhow. And they organized a mock conference about laughter and about comedy, which was really good.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's called like can't we laugh, something like can't we laugh of anything and everything in the modern context, cancel culture. So it's really funny. They did a really good job of both being a kind of mock conference with slides, and they go back to references of thinkers and philosophers about comedy and humor. And they quote them, and at the same time, they're playing and acting all the different types of humor in their interplay.
Wow. That's
And
clever.
some of them
That's
are
clever.
some of them they're referring to directly. Some others they don't refer to, but they're actually acting. So they're doing some physical comedy, but they don't actually talk about physical comedy. They're just doing it.
It's clever. That's
And
great.
they mix in a lot of really good stuff, and they address a lot of stuff of like both integrated bits and pieces of what was going on the day, which was quite entertaining. So enough leeway in their show to stray a little bit to integrate some elements of like what's going on right now.
Mhm.
And no, it's very good. And so just talking about climate change and going into bursts of like yelling. Suddenly we see one of them plays the very smart intellectual who thought about everything. The other one plays the dummy, who's a lot more physical comedy, and it's actually it was really funny. They did a very good job, really good job. Very entertaining. So it's all in French, so I can't really recommend it or anything, but yeah,
That's really impressive.
yeah, it was impressive. It was very well done. I mostly smiled. I did laugh quite a few times. It was good.
I'm writing down what we're going to talk about next week because I think we should bring it to a close.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out those games on the Switch from the two guys at school or whatever
Yes.
they were, because I think you'd find
There's
it interesting.
another game on the Switch I heard about that apparently is completely nuts called Pizza Tower. Well, I don't know if it's on the Switch yet, but it's out. It's out like, and some reviewers are raving about Pizza Tower.
Pizza Tower.
Yeah, it looks completely nuts, and like it's a game that plays like the old school WarioWare, and a little bit like Sonic, but with very simple but very expressive, cartoony design that looks like it was made with Microsoft Paint, of a nonsensical story of Peppino Spaghetti, owner of a down and out pizza joint, who's super worried and anxious about his pizza joint closing, and is feverishly dreaming about the bad pizza guy that is gonna close his pizza store, and he has to climb Pizza Tower and go very fast. It looks completely nuts. It looks also kind of like it has it looks very stressful, but really fun.
That sounds like my kind of game. So
Yeah.
we'll talk.
And you
We'll
have to
talk
go
about.
very fast.
We'll talk a bit about games. We'll also. Maybe we should start.
I didn't write anything.
Creating a character.
And my
Dragons.
mom's coming to town next week, so.
Or next episode.
Yeah, next episode for sure. Sorry, that's just offline. We'll talk.
I will also ask you a bit more about Sam Harris, because I started listening to Waking Up and the Basic Meditation.
Oh, did you? I bet I didn't send you the my free month, did I?
I don't think you did, but his voice is so good.
But that's part of the reason I stuck with him.
His voice is great, and there's no other interference. I also like
That's part of the reason I stuck with him. I really like listening to him.
The practice, and then the theory
the
behind
theories
the practice.
are fantastic.
Like, whoa, that's so good.
It's really good.
It's really good.
It's very good. Yeah,
I'm
there's
probably going to jump.
hours and hours and hours of content.
And I think I could listen to Alan Watts probably for ages. Probably.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it yet, but I will. So I'll ask you about that next week or next episode.
For sure.
So we got the games. I actually quite like talking about and listening to you talk about games and stories and gaming theory. So I'll probably come to that with some questions about before we get into an actual Dungeons and Dragons session. And I'll ask you a bit more about Sam Harris.
Sure.
And your meditations and thoughts and meditations about what his particular style of doing things is.
Yeah.
And then whatever else comes up, whatever tangents we discover. I also do want to hear what you think of John Wick 4.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to go see it today.
I'm kind of jealous that you're seeing it for the first time.
Wow. Okay. That's really
I know. It was genuinely that good of a cinematic experience. It
awesome.
really was.
I'm looking forward to it.
I hope I haven't oversold it.
I was going to go see it anyway. So.
All right. Cool. Stories, they run everything.
Yeah.
Create your own.
Good talk.
Do some writing.
Yeah, I haven't done any writing. So.
Are you going to do any this week?
Yes.